Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the wait. I'm going to start that over. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Finding You podcast. My name is Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. So happy New Year. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about couples and intimacy. And this is coming up in the context of the fact that we're having an upcoming workshop, a Finding You workshop for couples, run by myself and my wife, Michelle Reedy. And so, with that, I wanted to kind of prime the pump and get you thinking about the kinds of ideas that I think provide a really good backdrop and a good context for you to enter into any kind of couples work. Before I get into tonight's presentation, I'll just talk about our announcements. Our next intensive is full. January is full online intensive in January. January 24th through 26th is available. And then, of course, our next in-person Finding You, February 19th through 23rd is available. Those are outside of Park City, Utah. It's a 5-day intensive, a wonderful opportunity to do a deep dive into your work. I really think it's 6 months to a year's worth of psychotherapy packed into 5 days. I love doing them. And nearly every time people talk about it being a life-changing experience. I'm going to be hosting the Conscious Parenting Workshop. That's an all-day workshop this Friday, January 10th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Time. It'll be a small setting. We're limiting the number of attendees, so it's a good opportunity for more of a dialogue, more of a back and forth, not just me lecturing, but talking through issues and challenging in your parenting work. I'm going to be hosting an attachment-based therapy masterclass on March 7th at 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Time again. So if you are a mental health professional, if you work in the mental health field, or you want a little bit more advanced training on attachment theory, March 7th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. is that offering. Like I said, I'm going to be hosting the Finding Connection workshop. This is for 4 couples. It's very similar to our Finding You. It's not really appropriate for couples that are high conflict, but a great opportunity if you've wanted to do some of your own work and you want to do that with your partner. I think it's a great way to not just dive into your work, but to create a bridge between your work and your spouse's work. If you want information about any of this or to sign up or register, contact us at info@findingyouprograms.com. That's info@findingyouprograms.com. All right, with that, let's get into tonight's content about intimacy and couples. People talk about intimacy as if it's this warm, fuzzy, satisfying experience, and that ultimately is the end result. But on the way to that wonderful feeling, intimacy is angry, it's terrifying, it's hurtful, painful, and joyful. It's the bad news that we don't want to hear. It's all that we are and asks us to confront the parts of us that we have avoided up to this point. Intimacy is a tricky matter. And you know this if you're in a couple, because it's demonstrated by how often conversations go south on you. I might come to my wife to share some feelings, and most people would say that's a wonderful opportunity to create intimacy, but it doesn't always go that way, and vice versa. One of the things I've found absolutely fascinating over the years of running couples intensives, because we run couples intensives for individual couples and also for individual families. One of the things that I've found fascinating is, and this happens both with our families and our couples, is it's often that one person in the family is complaining about one other person and not really knowing them emotionally. They'll often say things like they don't really talk about their feelings, they don't really open up, they don't really share. And I don't doubt that description of things. But invariably, when I take the couple or the family along a several-day journey, we discover that oftentimes what that person does end up sharing, does end up saying, is oftentimes met with rejection, with criticism, with gaslighting, with dismissing or discounting responses. So in a very simple sense, the way that I say it is, it's very common that when one person in a family is known to be one who doesn't share, they might have a history of this, but oftentimes that history is repeated in the current context, that the other members of the family are unconsciously contributing to the dynamic where it's not safe for that person to share. And I can't tell you how many times, because the number is so high, that children, usually it's children or spouses, often it's the male spouse in a heterosexual relationship, It doesn't have to be, and of course in same-sex relationships it's going to be different in terms of the gender. But it's very often that individual who's being accused of not sharing, not opening up, will say to me, if I knew that therapy, that an intensive was going to come out like this, where I felt supported, where I wasn't put on the spotlight to be the bad one, to be the dysfunctional one, but that this was a systemic pattern. If I knew that, I would have come here a long time ago. So the take home from that is that intimacy is difficult. And of course, over time, we get better at skills, at communication skills. We get better at listening. We get better at articulating ourselves and owning our feelings. All of those skills, all of those approaches improve the likelihood of success of intimacy. But it's really, really difficult. I think about it tonight like I do when I do broadcasts on children and families. I say the same thing, which is, this is really hard. Being in a couple, being married is a very difficult thing. And so to simplify the ideas about what might make it better can easily be too reductionistic, can easily sound like the answer is too simple. I always notice this idea when I'm working with couples. I'll say to them, and I wrote this in The Audacity to Be You in chapter 6, I wrote, the seeds of a breakup or a divorce are often present in a courtship. A closer look most often reveals the mistaken idea that falling in love is about making each other happy. And that endeavor will lead to anger, shame, and the dissolution of the relationship until it is corrected. So in other words, the marriage was built on some immature, underdeveloped, faulty ideas in the first place. And when I see couples in the throes of romantic bliss, I can often see that trait, or each of the individuals thinks that the other person is responsible for their happiness. The dance of filling each other's emptiness is exhilarating in its infancy, in the early stages of romantic relationships. And it can be exhausting as it matures. Couples therapy helps partners to share in the journey and build a common understanding of the landscape of how their wounds fit together. I'm thinking about this so often these days, about how the outcome of psychotherapy as we go along is the individual or individuals becoming aware of their own dents and bruises, their own neuroses, their own limitations. I was sharing this story with a couple of clients today. My daughter gave some feedback when she walked away from a TV show we were watching together and asked me not to pause it, but I paused it anyway. And she turned around with frustration to share with me that she was clear about her request, that she didn't want me to pause it for her. And didn't want the pressure of hurrying to get back after getting some water, going to the restroom, whatever she was going to do. And I thanked her, first of all, for sharing that with me. I think you're right. I said, you're right. I do that. And you do clearly state. And I said, it's interesting because my nervous system, I have this belief that we have to watch it together and that you can't miss anything, or I want to share it with you. And my nervous system fights with me and compels me to press pause. I said, that's not your responsibility. I'll work on that, especially with this feedback. But the wiring is deep. And that's a simple, practically trivial idea or example. But that's how hard it is. We come to our couples with our wounds, with our dents, with our bruises, with our neuroses, with our complexes. Complexes are bundles of energy, of automatic responses to old ideas, to old situations. These kind of autopilot moments we go on when somebody cuts us off on the road, for example. That's a complex. We come to marriage with these complexes, and this blending of two individuals with all of their gifts, all of their wondrous, beautiful parts, but also all of their dents and their wounds and their missing parts. They come together, and if the couple is open to it, if both of the partners in the couple are open to it, it becomes the most incredible school, the university to discover who we are. We get feedback in these kind of intimate relationships more consistently and more powerfully than we do in any of our other relationships. So that old idea, that old romantic idea that we think about where we say, you make me happy, is like several of the other ideas that I talk about that is completely insane, psychotic almost. After a very difficult period, my wife and I came to the conclusion and embraced these mantras. I would say to her, it's not my job to make you happy. That's your job. And I would say, or she would say back, it's not my job to make you happy. That's your job. It's not your partner's job to make you happy. That's your responsibility. And when you abdicate that responsibility, even when it's going well, as it does in the early throes of romantic relationships, you are still not taking responsibility for your life, for your individuation, for your journey, for the steps that you need to take in your life. It's not your partner's job to make, it's not your job to make your partner happy. That is their job. Abandoning that faulty idea is a really important step in creating and supporting an intimate, long-lasting relationship. Love is oftentimes, the early throes of love are a psychotic experience. That means it's an alternative world. It's not based in reality. The famous teacher of psychotherapy, Irving Yalom, wrote in his book, The Love's Executioner, he wrote, I do not like to work with patients who are in love. Perhaps it is because of my envy. I too crave enchantment. Perhaps it is because love and psychotherapy are fundamentally incompatible. The good therapist fights darkness and seeks illumination, while romantic love is sustained by mystery and crumbles upon inspection. I hate, he wrote, to be love's executioner. Love is a kind of temporary madness. Phrases like, you complete me. He is my everything. She is my world. He is my best friend, my lover, and my biggest supporter. She is my better half. While all of the above statements might sound wonderful and may express, in a poetic sense, the powerful nature of romantic love, these statements can also reveal a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be in a healthy, mature, and intimate relationship. The idea of two becoming one, in a psychological sense, may be the seed of later problems in the relationship. So romantic love is somewhat delusional in its early phases. We most likely wouldn't get married if it wasn't so. And then after a couple decides to cohabitate, to commit to each other, to get married, then becomes the process of discovering who the other person is and who you are in that relationship. James Hollis wrote in The Eden Project, my favorite book on this subject. He wrote, so to be fascinated by the other is to be possessed by an affected idea. This is what happens in projection. In the most rabid stage of being in love, and rabid is by no means too strong of a word, one is unable to do other than obsess on the other. One is caught in a projective identification with the heart's desires, the boundaries between self and other dissolving again as they did for the infant. It is this search for home, this search for home that never was. It's very common in our culture for people to leave home when they find a partner. Either literally leave home or kind of principally leave home to recommit to the family that they're creating. And they imagine that they've escaped successfully their childhood wounding, when in reality, they have just found a good mother, a good father to replace the human one back home. But that good, that moniker of good mother, good father, will crumble, as Yalom says, under the light of inspection and over time. Romantic love, then, is the search and the discovery of a home that never was. And when the projections fall, as they must, the work for an enduring love begins. James Hollis goes on to say, of the many projections possible, the most common are those onto the institution of marriage, parenting, and career. Regarding marriage, he writes, perhaps no other social contract has so much unconscious baggage imposed upon it. Few at the altar are conscious of the enormity of their expectations. No one would speak aloud the immense hopes. I am counting on you to make my life meaningful. I'm counting on you to always be there for me. I am counting on you to read my mind and anticipate my needs. I am counting on you to bind my wounds and fulfill the deficits of my life. I'm counting on you to complete me, to make me a whole person, to heal my stricken soul. And that is so often the kind of poetry and prose that is uttered at the altar of marriage. This idea that the other person is going to be the one to fix you, to give you what you can't give yourself, to give you what was missing in your childhood or in your background. So tonight, I will make the point, as I often do, that the first ingredient in creating an intimate relationship with a partner is the development of self, which means the awareness of our wounds. The development of self doesn't mean becoming simply just healthier, getting better, getting gooder or righter. But it means coming into contact with who you are, which includes your wounds, your dents, your bruises. And I think there are a few things that I hear quoted back to me that people hear or imagine that they've heard that I've taught. And so often I hear people talking about this idea about self-improvement. And in a way that does happen, but really it's about self-love and self-compassion. In some ways, the project of self-improvement will forever be a frustrating experience because you'll never arrive at being totally improved. But self-compassion can offer enormous peace, increased awareness. Doesn't that make sense? If you have less and less judgment, if you feel more and more safe, more and more compassionate, then you're able to see yourself, all of your faults, all of your flaws. And it's then, really only then, that you're available to the deepest forms of intimacy. My proudest moments as a partner or a father are when I misspeak or make a mistake or lash out or leak some energy onto somebody in some kind of interaction, and I get asked about it. And without defense, I can describe the wound. I was feeling scared. I was feeling hurt. I was feeling defensive. I tried to attack because I felt threatened. Like I said to my daughter when she gave me the feedback about pausing the television station, this is my nervous system. My nervous system goes into autopilot so often in my relationships, so unconscious, so automatic. So like the Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh said, to love, first of all, is to accept ourselves as we are. That is the starting point for intimacy. That is the starting point for a healthy relationship. And the key here is ownership. Not fixing, not getting better. That will happen as a result of the ownership. But to own your stuff, to own your feelings. In the Eden Project, we read, all projection occurs unconsciously, of course. For the moment one observed, I have made a projection. One is already in the process of taking it back. More commonly, we only begin to reclaim our purchase on consciousness when the other fails to catch, hold, or reflect our projection. If there's an essential law of the psyche, it is this, that what is unconscious, what is out of our awareness, the parts of us that we have shoved into the closet because we have been told and concluded that they are unacceptable and will lead us to being rejected and alone. What is unconscious will be projected onto others. This is why it is observed that Jung observed that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside of us as fate. That's the key. If you don't know that you have anxiety, if you don't know that you're living in fear, You will develop a certain kind of paranoia, and you will see enemies and evil out there. That can be, of course, the only explanation for how afraid you feel, how assaulted you feel by others and by the world. That's what he means. So the job is to own it, to take it back. And to do that, we've got to find a safe place to do it. We've got to find a context where it's okay to be imperfect. And psychotherapy for me is that place. But it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not an academic experience. It's an experiential process. Something that we experience in the presence of a patient, compassionate other. Hollis goes on to write, but since the psychic consists of multiple split of shards of energy, the psyche consists of multiple of split off shards of energy, complex in archetypal forms, meaning lots of old patterns, lots of old ideas, lots of old ways of thinking of the world, virtually all of which are unconscious. There's always ample opportunity for projection. As I can never know the unconscious by definition or practice, so I can never know what energies may be acting autonomously and casting a veil of Maya or illusion over the world as I know it. This is the work to take back your projections. I've thought about this today because I've been working on this all day today. And I've been thinking about the idea of projection. And when I talk about this, this is something, of course, you hear about. I think most people have heard the term. They have some sense of what it is, at least in a very simple, crude way. They can describe it. But it's happening all the time. We take our feelings that are unpleasant, unwanted, and we create a story where somebody else is responsible for that. Somebody else is causing it. It is the fault of our child. It is the fault of our spouse, the fault of others in our lives. And of course, partners are the most likely suspects. So when people ask me, and people don't very often, but when they do ask me about my thoughts on looking for a partner or even a friend, my answer is to look for someone willing to listen, willing to be wrong, to be the bad one, to admit a mistake, or in other words, just to simply be human. And furthermore, become this kind of partner yourself. As I say all the time, it's not the mistakes that really vex people in families and in couples. That's not the thing that really does the damage. What does the damage is the defense, the ego, the idea, the energy, the complex, if you will, the bundle of energies where I need to be good. I can't be the bad one. It can't be my fault. I can't have sinned. Irene Claremont de Castillo wrote, an integrated individual is one who carries his own dark shadow of undesirable qualities, frees those around him from his projections, and by so doing actually transform a fraction of the evil into the world. And Robert Johnson, in his book, Living Your Unlived Life, wrote, the unlived life will be projected onto others to the extent that it is unrecognized. What you devalue and reject in yourself, you will criticize and castigate others for. What you fear in yourself, you will fight or flee in others. If you don't realize that you're the one carrying around the story, you'll imagine it happening outside of you. So James Hollis says the capacity for growth depends on one's ability to internalize and take personal responsibility. If we forever see our life as a problem caused by others, a problem to be solved, then no change can occur. The idea is to move toward wholeness, which is to take back the parts of ourselves that we have exiled, the parts of ourselves that we have split off or denied, shoved under the bed or into the closet, which then inevitably appear and we imagine in the faces of the people that we come across in our lives. In the Eden Project, Hollis wrote, if there's a single idea which permeates this essay, it is that the quality of our relationships is a direct function of the relationship we have to ourselves. Since much of our relationship to ourselves operates at an unconscious level, most of the drama and dynamics of our relationships to others and to the transcendent is an expression of our own personal psychology. The best thing that we can do for our relationships with others and with the transcendent, then, is to render our relationship to ourselves more conscious. This is not a narcissistic activity. In fact, it will prove to be the most loving thing that we can do for the other. The greatest gift to others is our own best selves. Thus, paradoxically, if we are to serve the relationship well, we are obliged to affirm our individual journey. This is the call. This is the task. The reason I like doing couples intensives is because if the couple is functioning well enough that they can tolerate this process with or in for the other, they can watch. You can see your spouse's dilemma. You can see their trigger points, their trauma responses, their unconscious projections. You can see it because it comes up. So that when it happens in an argument or a fight, you're more likely, more apt to be immune to the projection, to realize it is just your spouse and their fear and their dilemmas that is being acted out at that moment. It's not that it doesn't hurt you anymore. Excuse me. It's not that you ignore the hurt or tolerate the hurt. It's that it doesn't hurt you anymore. That is the goal of the couple's work. I took this next clip from the front page of the Finding You website, which is very similar from one of Hollis's other books. He wrote, "The truth about intimate relationships is that they can never be any better than the relationship we have with ourselves." That's what I'm talking about tonight. Understanding your baggage, what you bring to the table, your history, and you all have plenty of it, as do I. I'm not at home here just skating through life perfectly. I'm stumbling day after day. What I'm getting better at is owning that stumble, realizing that it's mine, realizing that nobody in my family is doing it to me. In the Eden Project, and the subtitle of the Eden Project is In Search of the Magical Other. Hollis writes, "The other great false idea that drives humankind is the fantasy of the magical other. The notion that there's one person out there who is right for us, will make our lives work. A soulmate who will repair the ravages of our personal history. One who will be there for us. One who will read our minds, know that what we want and meet those deepest needs. A good parent will protect us from suffering. And if we are lucky, spare us the perilous journey of individuation." That's powerful. We're looking for somebody to fix it all. In the book, The Eden Project, Hollis makes the point that people often criticize him and say, you don't really appreciate love or romance or romantic relationship. And he's saying, on the contrary, this doesn't make it less amazing. It just changes its quality. It's an invitation into a larger life and a deeper relationship, first with yourself and then with the other. And the hope comes, again, not in getting better. The hope comes in owning it, of taking responsibility for your own individuation, your own happiness, your own life's meaning. So what are the wounds that prevent our intimacy? Well, paradoxically, it's our fear of abandonment or our fear of being invaded, being consumed, being dismissed or erased. Eric Fromm wrote, "Paradoxically, the ability to be alone is the condition for the ability to love." See, I'm saying the same thing. And I wrote, one can only be available to intimacy to the extent that they've overcome the fear of being alone. Because if you're living from a place of fear of being alone, if that's driving things for you, you'll vacillate between denying yourself and feeling rage and attacking the other for not being exactly like you or giving you what you need or want. So we have to confront our fears of abandonment or our fears of intrusion. We have to understand what it means to be alone. It's why I say to couples who come to me, they say to me oftentimes in descriptions of the problems that they're having, they say, divorce is not an option for us. We're not going to get divorced. And I understand that they're not at that point. But what I'll often say to them is, divorce must be an option. If divorce is not an option, then you're not choosing to stay married and there is no love. So we have to acknowledge the fact that divorce can happen. As terrifying and difficult as that is to accept, it's one of the preconditions for intimacy, for a consciously chosen partnership. You can leave. I can leave. We can end this. It is a choice that's available to us, either one of us at any time. And with that awareness, I choose this. I choose to stay. I choose to work. And maybe that's what people are trying to say to me. Joseph Campbell explained that in marriage, eventually, facts will break through, destroying the projections of the early stages of a romantic relationship. And what comes next is love. In marriage, he taught, we must transform our passion into compassion. You can also leave, I wrote. But whether you stay or whether you leave, your psychological work is still there to do. You have to do the work either way. I mean, you don't have to. You can simply foreclose on the relationship, deem the other person evil, like many people do, and walk away with your self-righteous pride, which is what many people do. That old story that I often share when people say to me, my ex was a narcissist, my ex was borderline, my ex was an addict. My response is, that's interesting. And very commonly that gets reported to me. But what's truly fascinating is, why did you marry a narcissist? Why did you marry an alcoholic? Why did you marry a borderline or a depressed person or a sociopath? That's the most important question. That's the thing that's going to improve your life. And you have to look at that. Getting rid of them didn't solve virtually anything on a deep psychological level. It might be evidence of a solution. It might be evidence of your growth. It might be evidence that you've moved beyond and decided the other partner is either not worth it because of the pain that they cause, or because of their lack of willingness to do the work. You've deemed that it's over for whatever reasons you've decided. You can leave, but you have the same work to do either way. And if the work is not done, you'll inevitably recreate the same dynamic again, because you're still unconscious of your projections. In my experience, soulmate is a term that is earned through the long, painful, and difficult work of taking back our projections and becoming who we are, accepting who we are, embracing who we are, ultimately loving who we are. And if the marriage survives this process, it is absolutely magnificent. And we have to learn how to love. We have to really unlearn the ways and things and ideas that we were taught about love from our childhood, from our culture, from our background. Thich Nhat Hanh said, the secret of creating peace is that when you listen to another person, you have only one purpose: to offer him an opportunity to empty his heart. He said, you must love a person in such a way that the person you love feels free. I wrote in The Audacity to Be You, to understand somebody, to truly create an intimate experience with somebody, to understand and truly hear them, you have to lose your mind. You have to empty it of all your preconceived idea, to see the world through their eyes, hear the world through their ears. And the work that we do for loving ourselves, for healing, for taking back our projections and working on what is there, the things that we have avoided, the things that we have discarded. We do this healing so that we can hear what's being said by the other person without the filter of our wounds. So we learn how to love, and we don't. When I watch television or movies, I say this all the time, I so often get frustrated because what is put on screen as an ideal for love is often pathology. It's often dysfunction. It's old, antiquated, often ideas that are common in the dominant culture. For an example, one of the things I wrote in The Audacity to Be You is, there's no such thing as loving too much. By its nature, once it becomes, quote unquote, too much, It ceases to be love and starts becoming something else. Loving is being there for them. Loving is supporting their journey. Loving is taking care of yourself so that you can be available to them. Loving is taking care of yourself so you don't resent the people around you. Loving is setting difficult, scary boundaries so that you're left over with the energy and the capacity to be kind and generous toward others. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "To love without knowing how to love wounds the person that we love." And this is some of the more practical tasks. In intimacy, there are two fundamental tasks. The first task is to show up honestly as you are, to tell the truth, to express your feelings, your thoughts, your ideas. I say all the time that that idea of sharing, it is often equated with vulnerability. It is a courageous effort and gets all the press, all the ink in the description of intimacy, and it's important. But the second thing that needs to be required for intimacy to occur, to develop, is the ability to listen to hard things. And that rarely gets talked about. That doesn't mean listen to somebody saying something articulate and clear and assertive and an I feel statement. That's not what it is. That means somebody being irrational, somebody throwing a tantrum. And I'm not suggesting that you have to put up with abuse indefinitely, but I'm saying every human being is going to have those moments. Every human being that is upset is going to express things inarticulately, not using the proper communication skills, leaking, projecting, not owning their stuff. And for a couple in that moment, and maybe even over time, to remain intact, the other partner has to listen and hold space for them. As I've said in other places, vulnerability and telling the truth is only half of intimacy. The ability to empathically listen, in therapy we call it containing. The ability to empathically listen may be the greatest evidence of wisdom and mental health. It's definitely rare and at least difficult. So I came up with this chart, listening by capacity. I think a lot of people imagine that their ability to listen is largely determined by how the other person says it, or if they use you statements or I statements, if they raise their voice, if they use exaggerated examples, and all of those things contribute to some degree the temperature of the conversation, for sure. I don't deny that. But again, what doesn't get the scrutiny is, where is the listener? How capable, how much capacity, either over time does that person have, or in the given moment? Are they tired or hungry, overworked, overstressed, burnt out? So I came up with this scale about listening, the ability to listen, the kind of 5 levels of listening, I call it, by capacity. Level 0 is no capacity. In fact, I didn't have level 0 for a long time. I started at number 1. And somebody said, what if you don't have any capacity? And I thought, well, that's a really, really good point. If you don't have any capacity, then you're at a 0. You say things like, I can't hear it right now, I need some time. And then there's level 1. Level 1 is just keeping quiet, saying nothing. And I'm not talking about rolling your eyes or huffing and puffing. I'm just saying, just sitting there and listening. It's so difficult to listen because the ability to listen is predicated on how much healing that we've done and how much energy we have at the time. And why is that? Because if you're saying things, it happened to us in our couple relationship on Sunday. My wife had a lot of things to share about something that had gone on earlier in the day or the weekend. And as she was sharing her thoughts and feelings, I agreed with a lot of what she was saying. Some of it was, I thought, a gray area. And then there were several things that I didn't see the same way, didn't agree with. And I remembered to stay silent. She even asked me, are you at a level 1? And I wanted to grade myself higher and say I'm farther along, but I was at a level 1. She even asked me for reactions. And I thought, it's not time for my reaction. It's such a trap. We do it to each other all the time. We share something difficult, some feelings. We do it in an okay manner, an adequate manner. And then we ask for the other person for their response. But their thoughts are firing. They're having thoughts that are rebuttals and disagreements and seeing it differently. So the first level of listening is just staying silent, no matter what they ask for. The second level, level 2, is you're listening, you're having good eye contact, you're nodding. We call them in therapy, we call them minimal encouragers in communication theory. I got it, yes, right? You're engaged, you're softer. Level 3 is you're actively listening. So here was what I hear you saying. I think you're angry. I think you were scared. I think you were hurt. You're telling me you think that I was trying to get back at you for something. You're reflecting for the purpose of clarifying and understanding. That's level 3. Level 4 is empathy. Level 4 is I understand. That makes sense. I can relate. I would have felt the same way if it happened to me. And then level 5 is accountability, where it applies. I'm sorry. You're right. I did do that. I apologize. So these levels, this is one of those tools that I've developed in the last couple of years that I think is really important and really underutilized. If you take this, put it somewhere in your house, put it on your refrigerator, put it on your mirror, it can become a communication skill, an idea, a bridge between you and your partner. Where are you at? And if your partner says, I'm at a 1, I can stay silent, then you know that's all that's possible. Can you tolerate talking if all they can do is stay silent? Can you own that's where you're at? Can you own when you're at a 0? Most people cannot. Most people have too much shame. They don't want to be seen as the one without capacity, the one that is compromised. They want that to be outside of them. They don't want it to be inside of them. It's too shameful and too bad. So the tools become a way of looking at yourself and looking at the second part of the equation in intimacy, and that is listening. So as we start to talk about individuals, communication, we talk about the space in between. The great poet Rilke said, I hold this to be the highest task of a bond between two people, that each should stand guard over the solitude of the other. How am I to withhold my soul that it is not impinging on yours? Can I love you in a way that you feel free? Do you need to think like I do? Do you need to believe what I believe? Do we need to agree? Or can there be space in our togetherness? Can we feel and think differently? As Khalil Gibran said in The Prophet, let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. I've shared many times that prior to our, what we call the transition between marriage 1.0 and marriage 2.0, we started to understand the value of this space in our togetherness. Previous to this time, my wife's name on my phone was my everything, because that's what I thought she was supposed to be. I thought that was an indication of the highest form of love. After doing our work, and it took a couple of years, I changed her name to my favorite other. She's not perfect. She's definitely not my everything. But of all the people on the planet, she's the one that I've chosen to spend the most time with. She's my favorite of all the others. And that's a very different stance. So like I said, as it develops and we become more mature and intentional and conscious, we realize that divorce is an option. And if we get divorced, it won't fix anything. It'll just be different. And we will have the same work to do. The same exact work. Excuse me. As I mentioned, there are 2 projects: telling the truth and being who you are, and then holding the other with love and kindness. Let me make this point too, because I make this point in the book. Talking and sharing are oftentimes that you're taking and requiring capacity of the other. Talking tends to be a taking thing. and listening tends to be a giving thing. One of the points that I make when people come to our Finding You intensive is that a portion of what you'll be doing is holding compassionate, non-judgmental space for others. And that in itself will be, it's a great gift of this work. And as we mature and take back our possessions, instead of making the other person evil or bad, we just make the other person a person. Instead of my wife being a bad wife, she's just a human wife who has her own struggles. But again, because I don't want to own whatever it is that's working inside of me, I would rather take all of those quote unquote bad feelings. Are not really bad, but that's the way I experience them. I'd rather take that sense of badness or inadequacy in me and project it out onto her. So now she's bad because she's not giving me what I need. And as we grow, as we mature, this process will expose the emotional immaturity of the other. It will reveal the fractures that were present in the earliest ideas of marriage and intimacy. James Hollis explained that honoring the other and allowing for differences, it is to open the door to freeing oneself and other to be who each is meant to be. It is to open both to the possibility of something called love. And then we grapple with resentment. Resentment is often a sign that I'm not taking care of my project. I'm abdicating it for you and you're doing a horrible job with it. Instead of me taking responsibility for setting my boundaries, I blame you for not taking care of my needs. So I either work with, grapple, walk in and through the guilt and the shame, or I don't take responsibility for that and I walk around thinking that everybody's screwing me over, starting with my partner. Of course, the fear and the control that comes from our abandonment wound will wreak havoc if we haven't come into contact and learned how to hold and sit with and take responsibility for our wounds and our fears of abandonment. We will reduce ourselves to behaviors that are trying to control other people. The terrifying nature of romance and intimacy is this. It's because it risks everything. It risks showing up and having the same thing occur to us that happened to us when we were young. For a marriage to be successful, then, we learn to fall in love with our partner's dilemma over and over again. We do that as we come into contact with our own work. As Jung explained that the best way to understand someone else's darkness or dilemma is to know your own darkness, your own dilemma. The more you know and understand yourself, can see into the dark corners and the crevices, the more clearly you can see others and see them as separate. The great analyst Heinz Kohut wrote, "The mark of a good marriage is when only one of you goes crazy at a time." Because as children, we were required to navigate our parents' defenses to survive our childhood, we develop in such a way that we end up relating to people who are the same size in some way, same shape, same color as our parents. In other words, we become shaped by a certain kind of compromised person. And as we grow up, we're inclined to relate to those same kinds of people. We were sharing in our clinical meeting the other day about the forms of countertransference that we are most susceptible to. And as I described mine, it was my mother, or at least the role and position that I played in relationship to her growing up. Those are the ones that strain my nervous system the most. They're also the ones that I love the most and that I'm the most talented at because I have 55 years, 56 years of training. The shape of our wounds predisposes us to fit with others who mirror in some ways our original contexts. The work then is to come to know this, to come to understand our history. We're not responsible for what happened to us, but we are responsible for the result of what happened to us. We come to know and understand this by unraveling our childhoods, good, bad, and in between, so that we can make friends with who we are, with more and more of our whole self. And if we're lucky, we find a partner who is willing to travel a similar path that is their own. That is the work. That is why when people come, rather in the context of parenting, sibling relationships, or romantic relationships, I will often encourage them to do a Finding You individual intensive first. 6 strangers, do your work. Get that as the foundation. Then let's start exploring the relationships. Then we have a framework, a foundation, a reference point to understanding. I said to my wife a long time ago, she struggles with anxiety. I said to her one night when we were talking at the end of the day, I said, she was not feeling very good about her anxiety this particular evening. And I said to her lovingly, playfully, I said, if you died today, I would find another middle-aged, anxious woman to replace you. And she laughed with relief. And I said, that's just how it works. That's just who I am. That's what I'm used to. That's what I know. That's my project. That's my work. When we do our work, when we explore and come into contact with ourselves, learn to hold ourselves, learn to sit with ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we have been taught are horrible and rotten, when we sit with them with compassion, we change the frame from turning the other person into something bad to seeing them as just something human. Nobody likes feeling afraid, anxious, hurt, or insecure. But here's the thing. If you don't feel and deal with your feelings, you will project them onto your partner and your children in the form of anger and criticism. You know that salutation that I give at the end of every one of these podcasts where I say, for and in behalf of the people that you love and that love you, thanks for doing your work? That's what I'm talking about. It makes all the difference in the world. You take a little bit of evil out of the world when you do your own work, when you take back your projections. And in this way of thinking, what I'm describing tonight, you don't get to be right anymore. That's not the game. That game is dead. That game is over. But what you do get is you do get to be a self. And being a self is so much better. With intimacy, you have to surrender the need to be right. But what you pick up in return is so much better. You get to be a self. You get to be you. James Hollis wrote, the idea of individuation has been confused with self-indulgence or mere individualism. But what individuation more often asks of us is the surrender of the ego's agenda for security and emotional reinforcement in favor of humbling service to the soul's intent. Individuation is about taking back, about becoming responsible and taking care of yourself. Even though that you have been taught that that is selfish, even though that your partner will tell you at times that it's selfish. You have to face that guilt. You have to face that shame. You have to face that pressure and do it anyway. In the Eden Project, Hollis wrote, as Mahatma Gandhi once remarked, a coward is incapable of exhibiting love. A coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is the prerogative of the brave. Projection, fusion, going home is easy. Loving another's otherness is heroic. If we really love the other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own individuation and our own journey. And this heroism may properly be called love. Excuse me. And the paradox of individuation is that we best serve intimate relationships by becoming sufficiently developed in ourselves so that we do not feed off of others. Or more plainly put, my wife Michelle said, for deeper connections, we don't constantly come to our relationships hungry. We come with full bellies, take responsibility for our own happiness, and learn to find multiple sources of support. When we do these things, we are more capable of love and are often able to attend to the needs of others rather than constantly asking the others to take care of us. For me, I believe that the term soulmate is something that's earned. It's earned through the daily, lifelong work of the two people in it. We do our work. And this is how we say to each other, I love you. Joseph Campbell wrote, I think one of the problems in marriage is that people don't realize what it is. They think it's a lifelong love affair, and it isn't. Marriage has nothing to do with being happy. It has to do with being transformed. And when that transformation is realized, it is a magnificent experience, transcendent, joyful. But you have to submit. You have to yield. You have to give. You can't just dictate. And Hollis added as commentary, transformation is about enlargement, and enlargement generally comes from suffering. I have found that my greatest joy is when I can be myself in my relationship. Falling in love is profound when we can be ourselves. If I can't be myself, if I can't tell the truth, if I can't be contained, if I can't be listened to, if I can't be held with compassion and non-judgment, I'll disappear, I'll go away. I'll virtually fall out of love. But when we can be accepted as who we are, even though that's difficult for both sides, love is inevitable. Love and connection and intimacy is the result. So find what works for you in this process. Listen to the fights, the struggles that you have. Understand that listening is an important part of intimacy, and it requires healing. If you have to shut down your reactions, it will trigger, if you haven't done your healing, the feelings that you had as a child where you weren't heard. So to listen, you have to be okay temporarily. Setting on a shelf, setting aside, not ignoring, not burying, not denying, but temporarily set aside your own urges to listen. And remember, talking, sharing means that you're asking to be held. And listening requires a lot of energy. So you've got to know entering a conversation if you have it or don't. And very, very often, I want to think that I have it, but I don't, because I feel ashamed of not having it. I want to be capable. But my work is to know myself in the broader sense, in the larger sense, but also in the moment-to-moment sense. All right, folks. I hope that's helpful. Hope that gives you some glimpse. Hope it helps you understand what we do when we do couples work. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. Like I mentioned earlier, the next available in-person Finding You program is February 19th through 23rd. We have an online version, half the time and a third of the price, and you don't have to travel, January 24th through 26th. The Conscious Parenting Workshop is this Friday. My attachment-based therapy class is March 7th. And then, of course, the Finding Connection Workshop for 4 couples run by myself and my wife, Michelle, will be sometime this late winter, early spring. Contact info@findingyouprograms.com to learn more or to register for any of these programs. Next week, I'm going to be talking about humility and humiliation and the search for the real self. This idea about defenses, this idea about being humiliated and experiencing that as another small step towards understanding my authentic self. That'll be next Tuesday, January 14th, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. You can request copies of these or any slides at info@findingyouprograms.com. You can give me any feedback or ask any questions by emailing us at info@findingyouprograms.com. And as always, I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And for on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for showing up to these. Thank you for doing your work. It's the most profound way to tell people that you love them is to do your work. And it makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care. Bye-bye.